Hello, my kako. This is Kumuli Kala speaking to you about the Aha ceremonies for Ku, and this is part 3, the more Aha ceremonies. We'll finish off Aha ceremonies with this lecture. This is, again, all the readings from David Amalo and Hawaiian Antiquities concerning the Luakini. So we had a number of ceremonies. We saw that the log was cut, the Ohi Alehua tree log was cut from the mountain, that sacrifices were made there, that was brought down to the temple, it was carved and finished off, and then it was set up in the popo anna into the hole on the temple where it would be standing. We saw one sacrifice of a man in the mountain with the cutting of the tree, and he was buried there. That was to entice Ku to come from the mountain because he likes male sacrifice. And then we had another sacrifice of a male put into the hole where that carved image was set up. So they dig a deep hole and they put the man in the bottom, the dead man who's the offering, to call Ku to come and live in this wooden structure that they have carved out of his kino lao, out of the Ohi Alehua. Now we're going to have some other ceremonies, and this one on number 86, slide 86, tells us about the next set of ceremonies, which are kind of interesting and have a lot to do with communing with the god and eating of lono, the pig. So here we go. Number 86. On that same day, Kukolo, Kalamai. On that same day, Kukolu, Haikaina, the people were called together and a feast declared. This reading is somewhat conjectural. That is, the person who's doing the translation doesn't believe the number of pigs were actually killed, as we'll see. 4 pigs were baked. 1 pig was laid upon the lele as a sacrifice. 1 was devoted to the use of the kahuna, 1 for the use of the kahuakua, and 1 for the king and his men. So that's 4 pigs. The one for the king was said to be the pig for the mo'i over the pavement of pebbles. Interesting. Number 87. On that day also a few men climbed up on the roof of the house, mana, taking with them bundles of maku'u, of white kapa, 4 in number perhaps, which they fastened to the ridgepole, while all the priests gathered beneath them were reciting prayers. Those 2 men were at the same time gesturing in pantomime as if performing a hula dance. This ceremony was termed ho'opi'i na'aha lima lima. We don't really understand what all of that means. Number 88. Then came the kahuna who was to trim the thatch over the door of the mana. The name of the service which he recited was kuwa. After that an idol named Kahua Nu'u Noho Nio Nio Ikapo Kua was set up in the back part of the house, just opposite the door, at the spot where the post called Nanahua had been planted, and thus ended this ceremony. Number 89. That night all the priests assembled at this place to perform a service of prayer, in which they were to continue until morning. This service was of a uniform character throughout. It had been committed to memory, so that like a mele, the prayers and responses were all recited in unison. It was called kuili. Kuili. Lasted all night. Number 90. That night a large number of hogs, as many as 800, elualau, were baked, and the priests being separated into 2 divisions, one on this side and one on that side of mana, each division took part in the service alternately. The pork was also divided into 2 portions, 400 of the hogs being assigned to the priests seated at one end of the building, and 400 for the priests seated at the other end, kala. The priests and their men ate the flesh of the swine and continued their prayers without sleep until morning. So this is kind of a strange kind of communion, yeah? They're eating the pig, it represents lono, and they're eating lots of it. I think these are probably small pigs, considering how many pigs are being cooked. Because even if you have that many people there, nobody can eat a whole pig usually, so these must be small pigs. The next morning, which was kupau, the Kuili service was kept up and continued without intermission all day. That day, 400 pigs were served out to the worshippers, 200 elima kanaka, to those at one end of the temple and 200 to those at the other end. Yeah, so I'm not sure why 200 and Ilima Kanaka are there together. Sounds like 5 men. Mm. But I know that this is a translation. It's 200. Number 93. The service was kept up during the ensuing night. 240 pigs being baked and served out, 120 to the priests of this end of the temple and 120 to those of the other end of the temple. The service continued all night. During the next day, Ole Kukahi, the Kuili service still went on, and 400 pigs were baked and divided out equally between the priests at the two ends of the temple. Only the priests ate of this pork, not the chiefs. And that evening, the Kuili service of the kahunas came to a conclusion. In the evening, the king and the high priest went, as they had done before, to hold a service, aha, called Ho'ovili Mo'o. If this aha was successful, it was a most fortunate omen for the Luakini. The kahuna, having first besought the king for a piece of land for himself, then addressed the king in a hopeful and confident strain, saying, Your heavenly majesty, Eko Lani, you have just asked the deity for a blessing on the government, on yourself and on the people, and as we see, the God has granted the petition. The aha is perfect. After this, if you go to war with anyone, you will defeat him, because your relations to the deity are perfect. And that's the whole purpose of the aha, yeah, is to bring Ku to become one with the king, so that when he goes to war, he has Ku, the god of war, on his side. That same night, a priest conducted a ceremony called Kapapa Ulua. It was in this way. The priest, accompanied by a number of others, went out to sea to fish for ulua with hook and line, using squid for bait. And you will remember that ulua is a panihakahaka. It is a substitute for a man. So you don't have a man that you can sacrifice. You have an ulua fish. So they're going to fish for ulua. Now the ulua also represents that Ku god of the ocean and the Ku power of the ocean. So we have Ku from the mountain and the tree. Now we're looking at the Ku of the ocean. If they were unsuccessful and got no ulua, they returned to land and went from one house to another, shouting out to the people within and telling them some lie or another and asking them to come outside. If anyone did come out, him they killed, and thrusting a hook in his mouth, carried him to the heiau. If there were many people in the house, they resisted and thus escaped. So everyone prayed that they would catch the ulua, because they would have to have a man to panihakahaka for the ulua. Those two things go together. Also, you should know that the hook they're using is called manai, like Manaiakalani, Maui's fish hook that went into the sky and became the constellation Scorpio. That's a special hook for dragging the sacrifice by the mouth into the temple. The next morning, they put a long girdle or belt of braided coconut leaves about the belly of the Haku Ohia idol, calling it the navel cord from its mother. So remember, the coconut leaves represent the god Ku. They're braiding it. They're making a piko that's going to be cut for this new image, the Ku image, and it's going to become alive in their way of thinking because it's being born. Then the king and the priest came forward to perform the ceremony of cutting the navel string of the idol, and the priest recited the following prayer. Now this custom, this ritual is called okikapiko. It is the cutting of the navel. I want you to know this particular ritual for the exam. It's very, very important in the aha ceremonies, because we're not done with aha yet. We've had a series of aha ceremonies which are good, but this one, okikapiko, needs to also be done. Here's the chant. O ka ohe ke ia o ka piko o ke a iwa iwa lani. O ka uhai ke ia o ka ohe o ka piko o ka a iwa iwa lani. O ki oki ke ia o ka piko o ke a iwa iwa lani. O ka moku ke ia o ka piko o ke a iwa iwa lani. This is the bamboo for the navel string, for cutting the navel string of the wonderful idol. This is the splitting of the bamboo for the navel string of the wonderful idol. Notice that term, wonderful idol, is in Hawaiian is A Iwa Iwa Lani, and that A Iwa Iwa is a name given to Haumea. Remember, she was Haumea Nui A Iwa Iwa. It goes on to say This is the cutting of the navel string of the wonderful idol. This is the severing of the navel string of the wonderful idol. So this is very similar to the chant and the actions that would be done when a high chief or chiefess is born at the birthing temple, like Kukaniloko on Oahu or Hoholoku on Kauai. The priest then cut the cord, and having wiped it with a cloth, made the following prayer: Kupenu ula, kupenu lei, akahalapa ikiakua ila auaila. Sop the red blood, wear it as a wreath to the grace and strength of the deity. Yeah. Then the king uttered the amama, sometimes it's amana, and the service was ended. The next day, Olekulua took place the great feast. The chiefs contributed of their pigs, as also did the people. The contributions were arranged on the following scale. The high chiefs, who had many people under them, gave 10 pigs each. The lesser chiefs, with smaller number of followers, provided fewer. In the same way, the people gave according to their ability. When all the pigs had been contributed and oven baked, the king and all the priests assembled for the ceremony of girding the malo upon the haku ohia. E ho'ohume I ka malo o ke ki'i haku ohia. Now let's take a look at that word, ki'i haku ohia. Ki'i is a carved God image. They know it's a carved God image. The haku part is the boss. He's going to be the boss of the temple. And he's made from the ohia wood. It's kind of like a house to entice that spirit of ku to stay in the temple. But it's a carved image. It's a ki'i. And that term ki'i means to fetch. So this carving is fetching the spirit of ku. The whole body of priests recited in unison the Pule Malo, a prayer relating to the malo of the deity. Hume, hume na malo e lono, ho'ike kaua haile a hailono e. Gird on the malo o lono, declare war, declare it definitely, proclaim it by messengers. This is a carved ku image that was displayed in Bishop Museum last year. At the conclusion of the prayer, they arrayed the idol in a malo, and a new name was given to it, Mo'i, Lord of all the idols. After that, all the idols were clothed with malo, and each one was given a name according to the place in which he stood. So this is a time when the Mo'i will give his name Mo'i, or his title Mo'i, to the carved god. This becomes Mo'i now. This Kunuiakea is now Mo'i. And Kunuiakea gives his name to the Mo'i, and this becomes the Ma'i name of the ruling chief of the Mo'i. So there's a name exchange that goes on here. When the pigs were baked, 4 quarters of each pig was set apart for the kahuna, which piece was termed hainaki. Bundles of pa'iai were also set apart for the kahunas, that having been the custom from the most ancient times. When the chiefs and the people had finished feasting on the pork, the king made an offering to his gods of 400 pigs, 400 bushels of bananas, 400 coconuts, 400 red fish, 400 pieces of oloa cloth. He also offered a sacrifice of human bodies on the lele. So let's take a look at that. We have pork. The pigs are representing lono. The bananas represent kanaloa. The coconuts are representing ku, and the red fish are representing ku'ula, or the ku of the ocean. The oloa cloth represents the female. The females make this, so this is the female mana coming into the ceremony. And then there is kane. Those are the human bodies on the lele. We don't know how many kane are offered to ku. But it's kind of interesting that Kane was such an important god in Tahiti, and he was an important god in Hawaii before Pa'au comes and brings this new religion of Ku, but it's Kane that is demanded as a sacrifice to Ku. So Ku is gaining power over the god Kane. Before doing this, however, the hair and the bristles of the pigs were gathered up and burned, and the offal removed. Then all of the offerings were collected in that part of the court about the lele, which was laid with pebbles, after which the offerings were piled upon the lele. Then the Papa'olua priest entered the Lananu'u Mamau, that is the prayer tower, right, with the ulua. This might be the fish ulua, or it might be the man whom the priest had killed in its stead, as previously stated, and recited an aha, which is of different rite but belonged to the special service. When he had concluded his service, he put to the king the question, how was our aha? The king answered, it was excellent, most excellent indeed, said the priest to the king. The hook did not break, your government is confirmed. Then the ulua was laid as an offering upon the lele, and the kahuna went his way. So this is another ceremony, the ulua. The kane o ke kai, he represents a man of the sea. He's also bringing that ku power from the sea, because ku likes to devour that kane. After that, the lananu'u mama was dressed with white uloa kapa. That day was called the Day of Great Decoration, La Kopilinu'u, because of this decoration of the lananu'u mama. Towards the evening that same day, the priests and the people, together with Kahoali'i, remember he's the naked man, and the idols made an excursion up to the mountains to procure branches of the koa tree. In reality, the koa branches had been brought to a place not far away. When they had gotten the branches of the koa tree, they returned with great noise and uproar, just as they had brought down the Haku Ohia idol. On their return from the expedition that same evening, they made koa branches into a booth, or kind of a small house. And at the same time, the papakahui was let down. That night, they sacrificed the pua ahea for the consecration of the booth of koa branches, hale la la koa. In the morning, all the people assembled to eat of the hea pig. The fragments that were left over when they had finished their eating had to be carefully disposed of. It was not allowable to save them for eating at another time. On this occasion, Kahoali'i ate an eye plucked from the man whose body had been laid as an offering on the lele, together with the eyes of the pig, pua ahea. By the following morning, Olikukulu, these solemn services were concluded, whereupon all the people, priests, chiefs, and commoners went to bathe in the ocean. They took with them the Ka'ai gods, which they planted on the beach. When they had finished their bathing, they carried them with pieces of coral, which they piled up outside the heiau. So the going into the ocean, the hi'uvai, to cleanse, to purify, because all of the things that they have gone through, is also a rebirth from the ocean, being reborn from the mother's womb. And the white coral they bring represents hina. It represents that hina portion that goes with ku. They bring it to the temple, and they put white coral in the temple to bring the female part, an agreement to these ceremonies, into the temple. On arriving in the Luakini, a number of pigs were baked, and all chiefs, priests, and people being seated on the ground in an orderly manner in front of the drum house, they performed the service called hono. When everybody was in place, the priest who was to conduct the ritual came forward and stood up to recite the service called hono. And when he solemnly uttered the words, Okahoaka Okalima, Aya Iluna, the palms of the hands were turned upwards. Priests, chiefs, and people, all obedient to the command, held up their hands and remained motionless, sitting perfectly still. If anyone stirred, he was put to death. This service was tediously long, and by the time it was over, the pigs were baked. The people accordingly ate of them and then went home to their beds. On the morning of the morrow, which was Olipau, all the female chiefs, relations of the king, came to the temple, bringing a malo of great length as their present to the idol. All the people assembled at the house of Papa, the Haleo Papa, to receive the women of the court. One end of the malo was borne into the heiau, being held by the priest, while the women chiefs kept hold of the other end. The priest, meantime, reciting the service of the malo, which is termed kai oloa, or kai oloa. So this is now the portion that has to do with the Haleo Papa. All the people being seated in rows, the kahuna, who was to conduct the service, Na'anai Papakapule, stood forth, and when he uttered the solemn word Eli Eli, completed, the people responded Noah. The kahuna said Ya'e, O Ya'ia, and the people responded Noah Honua, freedom to the ground. The consecration of the temple was now accomplished, and the taboo was removed from it. It was Noah Loa. With such rites and ceremonies as these was a Luakini built and dedicated. The ceremonies and the services of the Luakini were very rigorous and strict. There was a proverb which said, "The work of the Luakini is like hauling timber, of all the labor the most arduous." The tabu of a Luakini lasted for 10 days, being lifted on Huna, the 11th moon, and on the evening of the following day, Mohalu began another service of a milder cult, a Ho'omahanahana service. This continued for 3 days, and with it terminated the special services of the king. When the people and the priests saw that the services of the Luakini were well conducted, then they began to have confidence in the stability of the government, and they put up other places of worship, such as the Mapele, the Kukoea, the Haleolono. These heiaus were of the kind known as Ho'ulu'ulu, or Ho'ulu'ulu'ai, to make food grow, and were to bring rain from the heavens and make the crops abundant, bringing wealth to the people, blessings to the government, and prosperity to the land. But only after the Luakini had been consecrated. Now, this might be done every year. It might be done every other year. It might be a few years before it was done. But this is what happens. The Luakini has to be consecrated first before the other temples can be built. After this, the king must needs make a circuit of the island, building heiaus, dedicating them with religious services, traveling first with the island on his right hand, this clockwise direction. This progress was called ulu'akau, growth to the right. When the circuit was accomplished, another one was made going the opposite direction to the left. This was termed ho'ihema, return on the left. It was likewise conducted with prayers to the gods. All the alii below the king worshipped regularly each month and from year to year in their heiaus. So the Ku service is done in the first part of the month, the Lono service in the second part of the month, around at the time of Huna. It begins. There's 3 days of Lono services. Then you have Kanaloa later on in the month, in Kanaloa moon, and Kane at the end. If an ali'i moku, the king of an island, was killed in battle, his body was taken to the Luakini and offered up to the gods by the other king, Hai'ia. In such ways as these did the kings and chiefs worship the gods in ancient times until the time of Liholiho, when idol worship came to an end. So that was a time when Christian missionaries came. But even before that, Kamehameha had put an end to human sacrifices, and he said to leave that for his son Liholiho. After he united the islands, he didn't do that anymore. He didn't have human sacrifice after that. So I like to end by saying Amama Amama. The prayer is ended. I think it's important for us, especially Hawaiians, but all who want to study about Hawaiians, to understand what our ancestors did, what their ceremonies were, why they did it, what was their rationale. And we choose today perhaps to worship Lono more than we worship Ku. I think we're all happy not to have human sacrifice. We all look at each of our brothers and our fathers and our sons as very, very precious. We don't want to have them sacrificed. It's a different world today. But I'd like us to note that this set of ceremonies maybe took 3 men, maybe 4 men, could be more as well, at the last ceremonies. They were to be lawbreakers that were sacrificed, and it was for political power because that's what the Ku god demanded. Today, many of us go off to war, and there is killing in war. It's not something we take pleasure in. However, it's not that different from the sacrifice that was done for the Luakini temple. Mahalo nui, and I'll see you in class on Tuesday. Aloha.